In this video, this is the final recording for our class, and I'll go ahead and get right into it. The first question would be, what are some of the basic concepts of social work interviewing? And the most basic reason behind social work practice and social work interviewing is helping other people, helping the clients that you work with. And, that since that's the core of it, essentially, of course, the biggest way to be able to do that is to build rapport. So, rapport building is another key concept of social work interviewing, rapport building, and assessment also. And when you're using things like rapport building and assessment and other skills associated with social work interviewing, it gives you a bigger picture of social justice or injustice issues. Number one, because you gain a perspective of not only what your client's going through, but what other people similar to your client, either similar culture or whatnot demographic, what they're going through, and you gain insight into the client's perspective and their experience. So the next question would be, what are the different helping processes involved in social work? So the helping processes that go along in interviewing rather would be engagement, assessment, intervention, and then the evaluation and termination stage. Those are the processes that go along with interviewing. The next question would be to define the roles of social workers. So social workers, I think the core aspect of it is to advocate on behalf of your clients, on behalf of vulnerable and oppressed populations and things like that. And there's so many different ways for a person who is a social worker or another helping professional to do that. So some of the roles social workers play, for example, would be a counselor, maybe a school counselor or some type of mediator, whether it be family intervention or drug and alcohol counseling, things like that, or even just a resource specialist. You could have a person who works at a community center and they help to, they're working with sometimes minorities or other, vulnerable populations and giving resources or teaching clients how to find different things and get access to different things that they need. So those are just some of the roles of social workers. The next question would be, how would social workers develop a plan for functioning, to assist clients in their everyday functioning? And what I have listed, working with the clients to create a plan of change is the number one aspect of that. That was work with the client. So the text taught us that in order to really help a person to gain, the skills that they need to function better in their daily life, you work with them. And in working with them, you help them to see what their strengths are and their resources and what other obstacles they may have. And you can help them to see how they can overcome their obstacles. So number one, part of working with the client would be to establish goals. Essentially, what the presenting problem is, what goals they plan to achieve, and, things like that. Another part of that is discussing resources, like I mentioned before, discussing barriers and ways to overcome them, discuss specific ways to meet the goals. So it's not enough to just list your goals. You want to work with the client to see, step by step, breaking it down. How can we achieve this goal? Give them that perspective. And then ultimately, evaluate progress and areas of opportunity. So once you work with your client and you've established goals and you've established ways of reaching those goals and you've went over different resources that they have, you want to step back and evaluate how effective they were or what areas that they still have to work on or overcome. So that would be a plan for functioning better in their everyday lives. The next question would be, how do social workers basically demonstrate effective listening? And that is one thing that, throughout my educational career so far, listening and effective listening is a skill that most people need to work a lot on. One of the biggest parts of effective listening would be to actually focus on your client. And, we're all people, so of course you have to learn to put your other problems aside or whatever issues you have going on personally, and you really want to focus on your client, as much as you possibly can. One ways you can do that would be to mimic their body language. That's also going to be a part of empathy too, but effective listening is you're really engaging and you're paying attention to body language and other things, facial expressions, things like that. You want to create the right environment, which, depending on where you work as a social work interviewer, you may not always have the ability to change your environment completely. You basically just have to work with what you have. Try to create a comfortable environment, things like that. You want to give center stage to your client. You want to focus on them. You don't want to be looking at your phone or looking at your watch or your clock or things like that. You don't want to appear to be rushed or nervous or anything like that. You want to keep in mind your presence and your posture, and sometimes even what you have on. I wouldn't want to seem like I'm up here and my client is here, things like that. You want to pay attention to nonverbal communication and even repeat back or summarize what's said. So that's also a part of empathy building, but I feel like with effective listening, of course, you're going to engage. So you're going to have, you know, nodding and agreeing and things like that. You want to try as best as you can not to interrupt or overspeak, with your client, and allow for silence. That's one thing that, especially in American culture, we're not really comfortable with silence, but giving space for silence, giving space for your client to continue on and, things like that. Those are some of the ways that you can practice rather effective listening. And then the next question would be basically how social workers use or express empathy in working with their clients. And the number one thing that I think is important with empathy building or in demonstrating empathy is to be sincere. That's one thing. You really want to be sincere. The text mentions it's not enough to feel sad or feel empathy. You have to actually engage in it. You want to really picture yourself in the shoes of your client, and that takes a toll too. It's the picture experiencing what the client's story is. You want to meet the clients where they are, and I think when you do that, when you're putting yourself in their shoes and meeting them where they are, that also builds rapport, and it allows them to essentially eventually trust you enough to give you more understanding or to express more about what they're going through. Reading their facial expressions and using supportive sounds and mirroring what they do. If your client isn't comfortable with direct eye contact, then you shouldn't use direct eye contact. You want to meet them where they are, essentially. And then the text also mentions an empathic echo, paraphrasing what's said and reflecting the effect. Those are a few ways that social workers use empathy in social work interviewing.